The sound of Minjun Kang's palm connecting with the woman's face echoed through the restaurant like a gunshot. Crystal glasses trembled on tables. Conversations died mid-sentence. The elegant black woman stumbled backward, her hand flying to her cheek, blood trickling from the corner of her lip. For a moment, the entire world seemed to hold its breath. Minjun stood over her, his hands still raised, his face twisted with rage and contempt. He had no idea that this slap, this single moment of violence born from pride and misunderstanding, had just saved his life. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. This story begins 13 minutes earlier. The Palazzo restaurant in the heart of Seoul's Gangnam district catered to a very specific clientele. The kind of people who didn't need to look at prices, who valued discretion above all else, and who understood that certain conversations should never happen in public. Minjun Kang was exactly that kind of person. At 38, he'd built an empire that existed in the shadows, dealing in things that governments pretended didn't exist. Tonight, he sat at his usual corner table, surrounded by 4 of his most trusted lieutenants, celebrating what would be the biggest arms deal of his career. To new partnerships, Minjun raised his glass of vintage whiskey, his voice smooth and confident. His tailored suit probably cost more than most people's cars, and he wore it with the casual ease of someone who'd never known poverty. By midnight, we'll be $20 million richer. His men echoed the toast, their faces flushed with anticipation and expensive liquor. They'd been drinking for over an hour, and Minjun's usual sharp edges had softened just enough to make him expansive, talkative. He leaned back in his chair, surveying the restaurant with the satisfied air of a king surveying his domain. That's when she walked in. Amara Johnson moved through the restaurant with purpose, her black dress elegant but unremarkable, designed to blend in rather than stand out. But there was something about her stride, the set of her shoulders, that made heads turn anyway. Minjun noticed her immediately, the way a predator notices anything that moves differently in its territory. She was walking toward his table, directly toward his table. His lieutenants noticed too. The conversation died as they watched her approach, hands instinctively moving toward concealed weapons. Minjun held up a hand, curious now. Beautiful women had approached him before, usually with predictable intentions. But this one's face held no flirtation, no calculated charm. Her eyes were wide, almost desperate. She reached their table and immediately began speaking in broken, heavily accented Korean. You, danger. You must leave. Now. Please, you must. Minjun's expression shifted from curiosity to irritation. Excuse me? Please. Amara grabbed his arm, her fingers digging into the expensive fabric of his suit. Her Korean was terrible, grammar fractured, words stumbling over each other. Bad men. They want. Kill you. Now. Here. You must. One of Minjun's lieutenants stood up, moving to intercept her. Hey! Get your hands off him. But Amara held on, her desperation overriding protocol and safety. She switched to English, the words tumbling out faster now. Listen to me, you're in danger. There's going to be an assassination attempt. You need to get out of here right now. Minjun didn't speak English beyond a few business phrases. All he heard was foreign babbling from a woman who'd had the audacity to touch him, to interrupt his celebration, to cause a scene in his restaurant. The alcohol in his system amplified his anger, stripped away the thin veneer of patience he might have maintained while sober. He stood up abruptly, towering over her. Around them, the restaurant had gone quiet. Every eye was on their table. Amara looked up at him, still holding his arm, still trying to make him understand something he couldn't. Let go of me, Minjun said in Korean, his voice dangerously low. Please, you don't understand. I'm trying to. The slap came without warning. Minjun's hand connected with the side of her face with enough force to spin her halfway around. She fell against a nearby chair, catching herself on a table. Someone's wine glass toppled, red liquid spreading across white linen like blood. The sound of shattering crystal punctuated her fall. Amara touched her lip, her fingers coming away red. She looked up at Minjun, and for just a moment, something flickered in her eyes. Not fear, not even anger, something closer to resignation. "Get her out of here," Min-jun ordered, his voice cold. "Now." Two of his men moved forward, grabbing Amara by the arms. She didn't resist this time, but as they dragged her toward the exit, she twisted back, shouting something in English that Min-jun couldn't understand. Her voice was raw with desperation, and heads turned to watch as they hauled her through the restaurant and out the front door. Min-jun straightened his suit jacket, his jaw tight. Around him, the restaurant slowly returned to its murmur of conversation, though eyes still flickered toward him. He sat back down, reaching for his whiskey with a hand that trembled slightly. Not from guilt, from rage at the interruption, at the disrespect, at the scene this crazy woman had caused. "Sir, should we?" one of his lieutenants began. "It's handled." Min-jun cut him off. "Forget it. Probably some junkie looking for money." But across the restaurant, near the kitchen entrance, a waiter in a crisp white uniform checked his watch. 9:52 p.m. He pulled out his phone, typed a quick message, and disappeared into the kitchen. If you're enjoying this story so far, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. Trust me, you won't want to miss how this unfolds. And drop a comment below telling me if you think Min-jun is going to regret that slap. Because trust me, he will. Outside the restaurant, Amara sat on the curb, her hand pressed to her swelling jaw. The Seoul night was cool, the street busy with traffic and pedestrians who gave her barely a glance. Just another woman having a bad night in the city. She pulled out her phone with shaking fingers and dialed. "Control, it's Shadow 3, she said quietly, her voice tight with pain and frustration. The approach failed. Target wouldn't listen. Language barrier was worse than anticipated. The voice on the other end was male, clipped, American. "Did you make contact?" "Made contact," explained the situation. He didn't understand a word, and then she touched her lip, wincing, reacted poorly. "I'm out of the restaurant now. Control, maybe I'm wrong about the intel. Maybe Chan isn't. The intel is solid, Shadow 3. Chen's planning to execute Kong during their meeting. You have 17 minutes. Amara closed her eyes. 17 minutes. She thought about walking away, about letting Min-jun Kong die the death his lifestyle had earned him. He was a criminal, an arms dealer, someone who'd built an empire on violence and misery. The world wouldn't miss him, but that wasn't her call to make. The CIA needed Kong alive. He was their key to dismantling the North Korean weapons pipeline, and without him, dozens of operations would collapse. "Initiating Plan B," she said quietly. "I'll need the tactical team in position by 10 p.m. exactly. They're already on standby. Shadow 3, are you sure about this?" "Once we go loud." "I'm sure. Kang's too proud to run based on a stranger's warning. We're going to have to save him whether he likes it or not." She ended the call and looked back at the restaurant. Through the large windows, she could see Min-jun's table. He was laughing now, his earlier anger apparently forgotten. She felt a flash of genuine anger. This man had no idea how many people were risking everything to keep him alive. Had no idea that she'd just taken a blow to the face trying to save his arrogant life. "You're welcome," she muttered, tasting blood. Inside the restaurant, Min-jun's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen and his expression shifted, the lazy satisfaction replaced by sharp focus. "The buyer's here. They've moved the meeting up. He wants to use the private room upstairs." His lieutenants exchanged glances. "Here? I thought we were meeting at the warehouse." Change of plans. Min-jun stood, buttoning his jacket. "Chun says it's more convenient. Less exposure." He smiled. "I like it. No travel, no risk of interception. We do the deal, collect the deposit, and I'm home by midnight." What Min-jun didn't notice was the flicker of concern on his head of security's face. The veteran bodyguard, a man named Jay who'd been with Min-jun for 10 years, felt something cold settle in his stomach. Last-minute location changes were never a good sign. But Min-jun was already moving toward the stairs, his confidence unshakable, and Jay could do nothing but follow. The private room on the second floor was smaller than the main dining area, intimate and soundproofed, perfect for private business. A single table dominated the space, set with wine and water glasses that caught the light from the chandelier overhead. Min-jun settled into the chair at the head of the table, his lieutenants taking positions around the room, trying to look casual while their eyes constantly moved, assessing threats. Mr. Chun arrived at 9:55 p.m. exactly. He was a small man in his 50s, wearing an expensive but understated suit. His smile was polite and didn't reach his eyes. Behind him came his translator and a single bodyguard, a massive man who moved with the coiled readiness of someone who knew how to hurt people. "Mr. Kong," Chun said in Mandarin, his translator immediately rendering it in Korean. "Thank you for accommodating the location change." "No problem at all," Min-jun replied, gesturing to the chairs across from him. "I prefer efficiency." They sat. Wine was poured. The initial pleasantries were exchanged. But something felt wrong to Jay. The bodyguard had positioned himself behind and slightly to the right of Min-jun's chair. That wasn't standard. That was an execution position. Jay's hand drifted toward his concealed weapon, but he couldn't draw it. Not yet, not without proof. Starting a firefight based on a feeling would cost him his job, possibly his life. Chun was talking about the merchandise, about delivery schedules and payment structures. His voice was calm, almost bored. But his eyes kept flickering to his bodyguard. Quick glances that might mean nothing or might mean everything. Min-jun noticed none of this. He was focused on Chun, on the deal, on the money. $20 million. Enough to expand his operations, to buy protection at even higher levels of government, to become truly untouchable. "So we're agreed then," Min-jun said, leaning forward. "Half now, half on delivery." Chun smiled. "Agreed." And then he nodded. Just once. Just a tiny movement of his head. Behind Min-jun, the bodyguard's hand moved toward the inside of his jacket. The lights went out. For a moment, there was only darkness and confusion. Someone shouted. Min-jun started to stand, his hand reaching for his own weapon. Then came the distinctive pop-pop-pop of silenced gunfire, muzzle flashes lighting the room in stroboscopic bursts. Someone grabbed Min-jun and threw him to the ground with enough force to drive the air from his lungs. He heard more gunshots, closer now, and the sound of bodies hitting the floor. Then silence. Complete and absolute. Emergency lighting flickered on, weak and greenish. Min-jun, lying on his stomach on the expensive carpet, looked up slowly. What he saw made no sense. Chun was slumped in his chair, unconscious. The bodyguard was face down on the floor beside him. His own men were standing, weapons drawn, but frozen in confusion. And standing in the doorway, holding a tactical pistol with a suppressor attached, was the woman he'd slapped 15 minutes earlier. Except she didn't look like the desperate, babbling woman anymore. She stood with the easy confidence of someone who knew exactly how dangerous she was. Her swollen jaw had turned purple, but her eyes were sharp and clear. Behind her, 3 men in tactical gear swept the room with military precision, checking bodies, securing weapons. "You're welcome, by the way," Amara said, her English accent crisp and educated. Min-jun struggled to his knees, his mind trying to process what had just happened. "Who the hell are you?" "The person who just saved your life." She holstered her weapon and gestured to Chun. "Mr. Chun here wasn't planning to buy anything from you. He was planning to put 3 bullets in the back of your head, take your merchandise contacts, and eliminate a competitor. You walked right into an execution." "That's..." Min-jun looked at Chen's unconscious form. "That's impossible. I've done business with Chun for years." "You've done business with Chen's organization. Mr. Chun here is new management, and new management wanted to consolidate power. You were a loose end." One of her tactical team members approached. "Buildings secure. We've got maybe 10 minutes before local police respond to the power outage." "Understood." Amara turned back to Min-jun, who was now standing, his face cycling through shock, rage, and confusion. "We need to move. Now." "I'm not going anywhere with you." Min-jun's hand went to his weapon. But Jay, his bodyguard, caught his wrist. "Sir, she just saved your life. Whatever's happening, we should listen." Before Minjun could respond, another man entered the room. He was older, 50s, with silver hair and the bearing of someone used to command. He wore a simple black suit that screamed government agent. "Mr. Kong," the man said in perfect Korean. "My name is Robert Hayes. I'm with the Central Intelligence Agency. We need to talk. If you're still watching, hit that like button and drop a comment. Let me know if you saw this twist coming, because it's about to get even more intense." Minjun felt the world tilting. CIA. The woman he'd slapped was CIA. Chun had tried to kill him. Nothing made sense. "I don't talk to American spies." "Then you'll die tonight," Hayes said simply. "Chen's people are already on their way. They'll arrive in about 20 minutes with enough firepower to turn this restaurant into a war zone. You have two choices. Come with us and live, or stay here and die. I really don't care which you choose, but my operative went through considerable trouble to keep you breathing, so I'd prefer you didn't waste her effort." Minjun looked at Amara, really looked at her for the first time. The swelling was worse now, her jaw clearly painful. She met his eyes without flinching, without pleading, just waiting for his decision with the patience of someone who'd learned not to expect gratitude for doing the right thing. "Why?" Minjun asked. "Why save me?" "Because we need you," Hayes said. "Your North Korean connections, specifically. You're going to help us shut down their weapons pipeline. In exchange, we'll protect you from Chen's people, relocate your family if necessary, and let you walk away from this life if you cooperate. And if I refuse, then we leave right now, and you can take your chances with Chen's reinforcements. I'm sure your 4 men and their pistols will do great against a dozen professionals with assault rifles." Jay leaned close to Minjun, speaking quietly in Korean. "Sir, we need to leave. Now, whatever their agenda is, we can figure it out later. Right now, they're offering us life over death." Minjun's pride screamed at him to refuse, to spit in their faces, to take his chances. He was Minjun Kong. He didn't run from anyone, but he was also a survivor, and survivors knew when to fold. He looked at Amara one more time, at the bruise he'd given her, and felt something uncomfortable twist in his chest. "Fine," he said. "We'll talk, but I'm keeping my weapons." "Fair enough," Hayes nodded. "Shadow 3, get them out of here. Use exit route Charlie." Amara moved to the door, her team falling in around her. Minjun and his men followed, moving quickly through the restaurant's back corridors. Staff had been evacuated, the building eerily empty. They emerged into a service alley where 3 black SUVs waited with engines running. "You and your head of security in the middle vehicle," Amara directed. "Your other men split between the others." Minjun wanted to argue but didn't. He climbed into the SUV with Jay, and Amara slid in beside them. The vehicle was already moving before the door fully closed, accelerating hard out of the alley. For several minutes, no one spoke. The city flashed past outside, bright lights and dark streets blending together. Minjun's mind raced, trying to make sense of everything. Finally, he turned to Amara. "You were trying to warn me," he said in Korean. "In the restaurant." "Obviously," she replied in the same language, her accent still heavy but clearer now. "I was trying to tell you that Chun planned to kill you during your meeting. You didn't understand, got violent instead." Minjun felt heat rise in his face. Not quite shame, but close to it. "You could have been anyone. A threat. I was the opposite of a threat. But your pride wouldn't let you see that." She touched her jaw gingerly. "You hit hard, by the way. That's going to hurt for weeks." Minjun stopped. Apologies weren't something he did often. They showed weakness, vulnerability. But looking at her bruised face, at the evidence of his mistake, the words almost came. "Almost. You shouldn't have grabbed me." Amara laughed. A short, bitter sound. "Right? I should have let you die instead. That would have been so much better." "I didn't know." "Of course you didn't know. That's why I was trying to tell you. But you were too busy being offended to listen." She turned to look at him directly. "Let me tell you something, Mr. Kong. I've been undercover in Chen's organization for 8 months. 8 months of playing a role of watching horrible things happen and not being able to stop them because I had to maintain my cover. When I learned about the hit on you, I could have let it happen. You're a criminal. You've hurt people. The world wouldn't miss you. Then why didn't you? Because my job isn't to be judge and jury. My job was to gather intelligence and prevent Chun from consolidating power in the region. Keeping you alive serves that purpose. That's all. She looked away. Don't mistake professional necessity for personal concern. The vehicle took a sharp turn, and they rode in silence for several more minutes. Finally, they pulled into an underground parking garage. Amara's phone buzzed, and she checked it quickly. Chen's people just arrived at the restaurant, she said. 12 men heavily armed. They're tearing the place apart looking for you. My staff, Minjun said suddenly. The restaurant employees. Were evacuated 6 minutes before we cut the power, Hayes said from the front seat. We're not monsters, Mr. Kong. Collateral damage isn't our style. They were led into a building and up to what looked like a converted office space. The room was sparse, functional, with a large table in the center surrounded by chairs. Maps and photographs covered one wall, red string connecting various points and faces. Minjun recognized several of the faces, including his own. Sit, Hayes gestured to the table. We have a lot to discuss. Minjun sat, Jay standing behind him like a sentinel. Amara took a chair across the table, still holding an ice pack to her jaw. The tactical team had disappeared, leaving just the 4 of them in the room. Hayes opened a laptop and turned it to face Minjun. Let me show you what we know about your operations. For the next hour, Hayes laid out details that made Minjun's blood run cold. They knew everything. Every shipment route, every contact in Pyongyang, every payment structure. They knew about his secondary accounts in Hong Kong, about his property investments in Singapore, about his sister's apartment in Los Angeles. They knew things that Minjun had thought were secrets, buried so deep that no one could find them. As you can see, Hayes said finally, we don't actually need you to tell us what you're doing. We already know. What we need is your active cooperation. We need you to continue your operations while feeding us real-time intelligence. We need you to help us identify the key players in North Korea, the military officials who are selling weapons on the black market. And eventually, we need you to help us shut it all down. You're asking me to betray my business partners, Minjun said. In our world, that's a death sentence. You're already living on borrowed time, Hayes replied. Chun tried to kill you tonight. That won't be the last attempt. Your business is eating itself from the inside. We're offering you a way out with your life and your family intact. My family's not involved in this. Your sister teaching English in Los Angeles? Your mother in the nursing home in Busan? You think Chun won't go after them to draw you out? Hayes leaned forward. We can protect them, but only if you cooperate. Minjun felt the walls closing in. Every instinct screamed at him to refuse, to fight, to maintain his independence. But he wasn't stupid. He'd seen what happened to people who made enemies in this business. They disappeared or died messily, their families often disappearing with them. How long? He asked finally. How long would I have to do this? 18 months. 2 years maximum. Then we help you disappear with a new identity and enough money to live comfortably anywhere in the world. Except Korea. Except Korea, Hayes agreed. You'd have to leave everything behind. But you'd be alive. Minjun looked at Amara. She'd been quiet during most of the presentation, just watching him with those sharp eyes. What do you think? He asked her in Korean. I think you don't have much choice, she replied in the same language. I think your pride got you into this mess, and swallowing that pride is the only thing that will get you out. Is it fair? No. Is it what you deserve? Probably not. But it's what's available. You really don't like me, do you? I don't know you well enough to like or dislike you. I know what you do, and I know you slapped me hard enough to draw blood. That's all I need to know for now. Minjun turned back to Hayes. I want guarantees. In writing. Protection for my family, money in escrow, new identities with full documentation. Done. And I want her. Minjun nodded toward Amara. As my handler. Nobody else. Hayes raised an eyebrow. May I ask why? Because she took a hit for this mission. Because she tried to warn me when she didn't have to. Because I trust her more than I trust you. Minjun met Amara's surprised gaze. And because I owe her an apology, and I'd rather spend the next 2 years making it than trying to work with someone I don't respect. Amara stared at him for a long moment. I don't need your apology. Maybe not. But I need to give it. Hayes looked between them, something calculating in his expression. Shadow 3? Your call. Amara sighed. Fine. But understand this, Mr. Kong. I'm not your friend. I'm not your confidant. I'm your handler. You give me information, I tell you what we need, and we maintain a professional relationship. Nothing more. Are we clear? Crystal clear. Good. She stood, wincing slightly. I'm going to get my jaw x-rayed. We'll meet again in 48 hours to begin your operational training. Don't leave Seoul. Don't contact anyone Chun might have compromised. And for God's sake, don't get yourself killed. I didn't take this bruise for nothing. She left the room, and Minjun watched her go, that uncomfortable feeling in his chest growing stronger. Guilt, maybe, or respect, possibly both. Before you click away, make sure you're subscribed, because the story doesn't end here. The next part is going to blow your mind. Drop a comment if you think Minjun and Amara can make this partnership work. 2 weeks passed in a blur of meetings, briefings, and planning sessions. Minjun learned how to use encrypted communications, how to photograph documents without getting caught, how to move through the world as both himself and as an intelligence asset. It was exhausting and terrifying and, despite himself, occasionally exciting. Amara was professional to the point of coldness. She met with him every other day, taking his reports, providing him with objectives, offering tactical advice. She never smiled, never joked, never let her guard down. The bruise on her jaw faded from deep purple to an ugly yellow-green, a constant reminder of their first meeting. On the 15th day, Minjun asked her to meet him at the palazzo. The restaurant had reopened after extensive repairs, the bullet holes patched, the blood cleaned, the private room completely renovated. He sat at his usual table, alone this time, watching the door. Amara arrived exactly on time. She paused when she saw where he was sitting, her expression unreadable, then walked over and sat across from him. Why here? She asked. Because this is where it happened, where I made a mistake. He slid an envelope across the table. Medical expenses, and compensation for the assignment I compromised. Amara looked at the envelope but didn't touch it. I don't need your money. It's not about need. It's about what's right. What's right is you following through on our agreement. What's right is you helping us shut down the weapons pipeline. Money doesn't fix what happened here. I know. Minjun leaned back. I asked around about you. Your real name isn't Amara Johnson. You have 3 degrees, speak 6 languages, and turned down a position at State Department to go undercover. You've been doing this for 7 years, and you're so good at it that most of your colleagues don't even know you exist. Researching your handler isn't smart. Probably not. But I needed to understand who I'm working with. Who I hit. He paused. You could have warned me in a dozen different ways. You could have slipped a note to one of my men. You could have called from a blocked number. But you walked right up to me in person, knowing I probably wouldn't understand you, knowing I might react badly. Why? Amara was quiet for a long moment. Because a phone call can be ignored. A note can be missed. But a person standing right in front of you, desperate enough to risk physical harm to deliver a message? That's harder to dismiss. I gambled that your curiosity would outweigh your anger. I was wrong. You were right about the curiosity, just wrong about the timing. Clearly, a waiter approached with wine, and Minjun waved him off. Just water for both of us. When they were alone again, Minjun said, I've been thinking about that night. About how close I came to dying because I was too proud to listen. Too arrogant to consider that a stranger might be trying to help me. Most people don't help people like you, Mr. Kong. Your suspicion was earned. Maybe, but it almost killed me. He met her eyes. I asked Hayes if you could be my handler not just because I trust you. I asked because I need someone who won't let me get comfortable. Someone who'll remind me what pride costs. You do that just by being here. Is this your version of an apology? Because if so, it needs work. No, this is. Minjun stood and, in full view of the entire restaurant, bowed deeply. It was a formal Korean bow, the kind reserved for expressing deep respect or profound apology. Conversations stopped. Heads turned. In their world, for someone like Minjun Kong to bow to anyone was unthinkable. When he straightened, Amara's expression had shifted. Not quite softened, but something in her eyes had changed. You didn't have to do that. Yes, I did. What I did to you was wrong. The reasons don't matter. The circumstances don't matter. I judged you wrongly, acted violently, and nearly died because of my own arrogance. You deserved better. You deserve better now. Amara picked up the envelope, looked inside briefly, then set it back down. I don't accept apologies, Mr. Kong. I accept results. Then you'll be pleased. I have information about the shipment routes you asked for. 3 new contacts in Pyongyang, complete with their personal communication protocols. And I've identified the military official who's been facilitating the weapons transfers. For the first time since they'd met, Amara smiled. It was small, barely there, but genuine. That's a good start. Just a start. We have 18 months of work ahead of us, Mr. Kong. This is barely the beginning. Fair enough. He gestured to her chair. Will you stay? Have dinner? I promise no more scenes. She hesitated, and he could see her weighing professional distance against practical necessity. They would be working together for nearly 2 years. Maintaining nothing but cold professionalism might actually make the job harder. One dinner, she said finally. But we split the check. This isn't a date or a reconciliation. It's a working meal. Agreed. They ordered, and as they ate, the conversation shifted from operational details to something almost casual. Amara told him about her experience learning Korean, about the cultural mistakes she'd made during her first undercover assignment. Minjun found himself talking about his childhood, about how he'd gotten into this life almost by accident. One bad decision leading to another until turning back was impossible. Do you regret it? Amara asked. The life you chose? Minjun considered the question seriously. I regret the things I've done to stay alive in this world. The compromises, the violence. But regret doesn't change anything. I am who I am. Who you were, Amara corrected. You're changing. Maybe not by choice, but you're changing nonetheless. Is that a good thing? Ask me in 18 months. As she stood to leave, Minjun said, the woman who takes a slap to save her enemy's life. That's not something most people would do. Amara paused at the table's edge. You were never my enemy, Mr. Kong. Just a necessary asset. Just an asset? Is that all? She looked at him for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Let's get through the next few months. Then we'll see what you are. She walked away, and Minjun watched her go, feeling something he hadn't felt in years. Hope, maybe, or the possibility of redemption. He touched his cheek, the one that had struck hers, and felt the weight of that moment settle over him like a promise. 6 months later, the North Korean weapons pipeline was in ruins. Minjun's intelligence had helped the CIA identify and neutralize 17 key players in the organization. Chen's syndicate had collapsed in a series of coordinated raids across 3 countries. And Minjun Kong, the feared Korean Mafia boss, had quietly disappeared from Seoul, his empire dismantled, his family relocated to safety. The last person to see him was Amara. They met one final time in a small cafe in Singapore, where Minjun would begin his new life under a new name. She handed him a folder containing his new identity documents and bank information. This is it, she said. After this, we never see each other again. That's how this works. I know. Minjun took the folder but didn't open it. I never thanked you properly for saving my life, for giving me a chance to become something other than what I was. I was doing my job. It was more than that, at least for me. He smiled, and it was genuine, without the calculated charm he'd once worn like armor. That night in the restaurant, when you walked up to me, desperate and brave and so determined to help someone who didn't deserve it, that changed everything. Not the slap. Your willingness to risk yourself for someone you had no reason to help. Amara's expression softened slightly. For what it's worth, Mr. Kong, you did good work these past months. You kept your word. That means something. Just good work? Is that all I am? Still just an asset? She stood up, preparing to leave his life forever. But at the cafe door, she turned back. You're proof that people can change. Even when they don't want to. Even when it costs them everything they thought they were. That's worth more than being an asset. Is that a compliment? Don't let it go to your head. You've still got a long way to go. She left, and Minjun sat alone with his new identity, his new life stretching out before him. He thought about that moment in the restaurant, about pride and arrogance and the sound of a slap echoing through expensive silence, about a woman brave enough to stand in harm's way for a stranger, about how close he'd come to throwing away a chance at redemption. The alliance between a disgraced mafia boss and a CIA operative became legendary in intelligence circles. Though few knew the real story, they didn't know about the slap that started it all, about the misunderstanding that nearly cost a life, about the pride that had to break before understanding could begin. Minjun never saw Amara again, but sometimes, late at night in his new life, he'd touch his cheek and remember. Remember the sound of crystal shattering. Remember blood on white linen. Remember the moment violence taught him the cost of not listening, of judging too quickly, of letting pride make decisions that wisdom should make. And he'd remember her voice, cold and professional, telling him that results mattered more than apologies. He'd built a new life on that principle. Results, actions, becoming someone worth saving. The slap had echoed through that restaurant for 3 seconds, but its consequences had reverberated through years, changing the course of international weapons trafficking, dismantling criminal empires, and transforming a man who'd thought he was untouchable into someone who understood that sometimes the hardest person to save is yourself. Sometimes salvation comes from the most unexpected places. Sometimes it wears a black dress and speaks broken Korean and is willing to take a blow to deliver a truth you don't want to hear. And sometimes, if you're very lucky and very willing to change, that moment of violence becomes the first step toward redemption. Minjun Kong learned that lesson the hard way, with the taste of blood and shame and the sound of breaking glass, with the image of a woman who refused to let him die even when he'd given her every reason to walk away. He never forgot her, and he spent the rest of his life trying to become someone who deserved the sacrifice she'd made. That's the story of how a slap saved a life. Not in spite of the violence, but because of what came after. Because sometimes you need to hit rock bottom before you can start climbing up. Sometimes you need to see yourself through someone else's eyes, bruised and bleeding, to understand what you've become. And sometimes the person you hit is the only one brave enough to show you the truth. If this story moved you, if it made you think about pride and redemption and the cost of not listening, hit that subscribe button. Share this with someone who needs to hear it. Leave a comment telling me what moment hit you hardest. Because stories like this, about people changing against all odds, about second chances earned through hard work rather than given freely, these are the stories we all need to hear. The restaurant still stands in Gangnam. The table where Minjun sat that night is still there, though new guests occupy it now, unaware of the drama that unfolded in that space. The staff who witnessed the slap have mostly moved on, the story becoming legend, details changing with each retelling until truth and fiction blend together. But somewhere in Singapore, a man with a new name and a new life still thinks about that night, about the sound of his palm connecting with her face, about the desperate light in her eyes as she tried to save him from himself. And somewhere in Virginia, a woman with a scar on her lip that never quite faded reviews intelligence reports and trains new operatives and tells them that the hardest part of the job isn't going undercover or risking your life. It's knowing when to save someone who doesn't want to be saved. It's having the courage to stand in front of danger and say, "Not today." She never tells them about the slap. That's personal, a moment that belongs only to her and to the man she saved. But sometimes she touches her jaw, feeling the ghost of an old injury, and wonders if he made it. If he's living the life they bought him with intelligence and sacrifice and careful planning. She hopes he is, not because she likes him or forgives him, but because the work they did together mattered. Because 18 months of her life went into giving him a second chance, and she'd like to think it wasn't wasted. Results over apologies. Actions over words. That's what she told him, and it's what she still believes. The story ends here, but the lessons linger. About listening when strangers speak. About setting aside pride when survival demands it. About the courage it takes to save someone who's hurt you. About redemption being something you earn, not something you're given. Min Jun Kong slapped Amara Johnson in a restaurant on a Tuesday night in Seoul. That single moment of violence rippled out into the world, changing lives, toppling empires, and proving that sometimes the worst mistakes we make become the catalyst for the best changes we'll ever achieve. He went into that restaurant as a mafia boss who thought he was untouchable. He left as a man who understood how fragile life really is, how quickly pride can become a death sentence, and how sometimes the hand that strikes you is the same hand that catches you when you fall. That's the power of a moment, of a choice, of someone willing to stand between you and death even when you don't deserve it. And that's the story of the slap that saved a life. Thank you for watching. If you made it this far, you're the real MVP. Subscribe for more stories that'll make you think. Comment below with your thoughts. And remember, sometimes the people trying to save you are the ones you least expect. Listen to them. You might just live long enough to thank them.